One of the most frequently asked questions I get from people who want to get into finding lost media is, where do you start? Lost media is so big, and the avenues to get something unearthed can be long and difficult. So what's the best course of action to take? This question isn't necessarily asking how do you contact people, it's actually as simple as what topic should I search for, and is by far the most common problem that most newcomers into lost media are faced with. My advice for every one of these situations is simply pick a topic you're interested in researching. Lost media becomes way more fun and less of a chore when you're searching for content you genuinely care about, and people will naturally see that passion and join the search in one way or another. This mindset is something I always try to apply to my videos as well. When I put my videos together, I choose topics that I genuinely care about and ones that I'm also passionate enough to talk about, because it makes them so much better. That's why today, we're going to take a look at several lost media topics that don't necessarily revolve around a theme, series, or channel, but ones that I've come across over the years that I haven't been able to work into their own dedicated videos, but are still interesting to discover nonetheless. You never know what's going to get brought up here on Lost Media Megamix. Without a doubt, one of the most interesting and popular categories of lost media to research is that of Nickelodeon, and pretty much since the beginning of the Lost Media Wiki itself, there's been mysteries regarding the channel that have become popular and interesting. There was Crybaby Lane, a Halloween-themed movie that Nickelodeon aired once and forgot about entirely, until a VHS copy was discovered and rebroadcast over a decade later. Then there was Clockman, a mysterious short which was only rumored to exist by a couple people, who remembered it from decades ago, until a copy of the short was discovered on YouTube. And of course, the dozens of searches relating to lost pilots and shorts which have gained a following over the years. Today's mystery is definitely similar to these, as it discusses another allegedly scary short that aired on the channel, yet no one else remembers or can seem to find. There's a post that's been sourced back to a forum from May of 2019, in which a user discusses a Nickelodeon short that they can't seem to find. The post states, "So this has been on my mind lately, and it's this short I remember seeing on Nicktoons, maybe back around 2011 I think. I remember it being about this boy, who had a bunch of balloons with him, and there were these black stick pointy creatures that were following him, and they were trying to pop his balloons, and every time a balloon got popped, the boy started to become more and more like these stick creatures. I remember it ending with the boy getting away from the creatures and only had one balloon left. The only part of himself remaining was his head, and the rest of his body turned into a stick creature. And he ends up popping his last balloon, and it just ends right there. I tried looking this short up, but honestly, it's hard when I don't know the name of it and doubt it even existed, and don't know much about it other than I simply remember it being on. Heck, I even remember my grandmother commenting on it, but I doubt she'd remember it since it wasn't really significant. Does anyone know the name of this short, or at least know it exists?" The user provided a mock-up picture of what the characters in the short look like, but no one else in the thread seems to recall what it could be. I also looked online myself for any other mentions of the short, but came up empty-handed. Though I believe this definitely could exist, as lost shorts that only get played once or twice happened quite often back in the day. Nickelodeon even had a series where kids could create their own shorts called Short Films by Short People, which is where I recently discovered a scary short from my childhood. It was about a large vulture chasing kids, and for years it was something I thought I had made up or misremembered, but it actually exists. Nickelodeon is full of content like this, so I'm sure we'll get more information about this balloon short as more people look for evidence of its existence. I've mentioned before that I wished retail history and defunct stores were something I could do a better job of covering on my channel, and another area of which I feel similar towards are video games that ended up becoming forgotten or overlooked through the years. Only within the past couple years did I break from my Nintendo roots and actually explore the huge world of games that are on other consoles. I missed out on a lot over the years, but it's been really fun getting into new franchises for the first time, and having new experiences I've never had before. It seems like the joke of wishing you could replay your favorite games for the first time is kinda true here. One of the series I got really into last year was Time Crisis, a series of arcade light gun games that got ported to the PS2 in the early 2000s. I'm pretty sure I came across some of the arcade machines as a kid, but didn't appreciate the genre, whereas now it's so much fun testing my reflexes and accuracy at home without using a normal game controller. Though something that I've always thought was strange when it came to the Time Crisis series is how underutilized it seems to be. The series has 5 main entries and some spin-offs, but outside of the fact that they exist, the franchise has kind of been stuck in the past, and never grew like Tekken or Soul Calibur did, Namco's other franchises. However, that almost wasn't the case, and if it hadn't been for a cancelled game, the series could have taken a different direction and become more of a household name. The only evidence I found of this game's existence comes from Unseen64, and outside of the article, there's no other mention of it online, or any other Time Crisis beta content, in fact. It states that a new entry in the series, called Time Crisis Adventure, was pitched for the original Xbox console in 2003. It was being developed by Darkworks in collaboration with Namco. However, the project originally started off as something entirely different. Darkworks was originally working in collaboration with Capcom to create an action-adventure game called Lost Mantis. This title was first announced by Capcom in 2001 and was also being developed for the original Xbox, but after a couple years was cancelled for unknown reasons. From there, the title was being reworked with Namco to create Time Crisis Adventure, but after only a year in development, Namco also pulled out and the project was scrapped yet again. Darkworks would eventually partner with Ubisoft not long after and release the game as Cold Fear for the original Xbox in 2005. Of course, all Time Crisis references were removed, and actually, we don't even have any idea of what the game was like in the Namco iteration. Unseen64 has a collection of screenshots which look similar to environments seen in Time Crisis, but not specific enough to really get a feel for what this version of the game was like. Lost Mantis has several screenshots of locations and characters which definitely have a Time Crisis feel to them. Cold Fear itself ended up as a survival horror game with similar environments, so I think the industrial environments and special agent character archetype that the earlier game had did end up finding its way into the final product. I'd even go as far to say Tom Hansen, the protagonist of Cold Fear, looks like Keith Martin, the protagonist from Time Crisis 2. The last entry in the Time Crisis series was the 5th game, which came out in 2015, so it's definitely been a while since a new title, though it never received a home console port. It seems unlikely that Namco has any plans for the series, and I feel like if there was ever a time for Time Crisis to explore new genres, it would have been back in the early 2000s at the height of its popularity. If you take a close look at any subculture or community that's been around long enough to have developed a rich history, it's a guarantee there will be some fascinating elements that make up its foundation. This is exactly how I feel about the early days of anime and manga here in the US, and it's incredibly interesting to discover what those early days were like, before the thousands of series that became available instantly on streaming apps, or translated manga that would release at the same time as those chapters would come out in Japan. I never got to experience these early days for myself, and the closest experience I can recall was when I checked out the anime club in high school. It was held in a small computer room and hosted by 3 nerds who played that Squid Girl anime and something else that was really obscure. This was in 2010, after Toonami had been cancelled, but before the likes of Attack on Titan and One Punch Man would bring mainstream attention to it. But back in the 80s and 90s, you were way more limited with what you could get your hands on, and which series were even available at all. The most popular ways to acquire content were either knowing someone in Japan who could seek out VHS tapes with recordings for you, or contacting a fan sub community to get English captions on what are essentially bootleg VHS recordings of a master tape. Shonen Jump wasn't even around as we know it today, and licenses were all over the place, which is where the mystery begins. I can't even remember how I found this mystery in the first place, but it comes from a Fist of the North Star blog, and from a longtime fan of the series named RWG, dating back to the late 1980s. While working at a local comic book shop around the same time, he came upon a solicitation package one day, and opened it to discover an announcement that Fist of the North Star would be receiving an English translation and be released as a bi-weekly comic series. The ad was impressive for the time, and even contained a write-up about the series, as well as some panels from the manga, but something was off about the whole project. Fist of the North Star wasn't known at all outside of Japan at that point, and its distributor, a company by the name of Angel Comics, had never been heard of by RWG or any of his friends in the comic community. It was really strange how the ad seemed to mysteriously appear and actually continued to appear for 2 more months, until they just stopped, and to this day, no one really knows who or what the whole Angel Comics situation was about. Whatever they had planned went unpublished, which would have preceded Viz's adaptation by 2 years. But it's most commonly believed that the Angel Comics version would have technically been an unofficial release. RWG found a Viz newsletter from around that time, in which they stated Angel Comics was an obscure publisher who had solicited a pirated version of the manga and were stopped for the good of all. That's all that was ever really stated about them, but it's a believable conclusion to come to, and it fits perfectly with the idea that licenses and interest in releasing this content for the first time was all over the place before official companies started doing it. While Viz did own the rights to Fist of the North Star at the time, it's speculated that Angel Comics' attempt to publish directly caused Viz to release their official localization only a short time after. It's not known how far Angel Comics got with the series before they were shut down, but there were English panels on the advertisement, so some effort must have gone into getting the Japanese manga and translating the panels on an old 80s computer. Obviously, it's a good thing Viz stepped in and prevented piracy, but the whole situation is pretty bizarre and really gives you an idea of how the anime and manga community was so young. While the world of lost media is vast and expansive, sometimes it seems as though there's just no lost media when it comes to certain franchises or series. For example, Naruto is one of my favorite anime series of all time, for the fact that it's what got me into the genre back when Cartoon Network was airing it in the mid-2000s. So I've always thought it would be pretty cool to make a video on that kind of thing. However, based on my research, it's pretty clear that the Naruto series has very little lost media at all, and what I could find isn't very notable, with the only topic of note being an OVA recap special that was exclusively aired in the US. There's a thread on the Lost Media Wiki forums that discusses this and how it was apparently aired once and never again, while also never being released on home media. What this search comes down to is finding it on a VHS recording from the day it aired, which has already happened, as part of the special was found. Anyway, this isn't the most interesting content for me to research, so when I do come across a topic for a series with lost media that I never expected, it goes without saying that I get really excited. Dodonpachi is a vertical shmup that was released in arcades and ported to the Sega Saturn in 1997. It was only released in Japan, but quickly became one of my favorite games in the genre once I imported it for my Saturn. There's something about old Japanese arcade games that really gets the blood pumping, and this game is full of shooting action, even though I'm not too good at it yet. But for the hardcore shmup fans, or fans of the Dodonpachi series, you might be surprised to hear that there's a special version of Dodonpachi that very few people have ever played and cannot even be played currently in these modern times. This is Dodonpachi Campaign Version, a remix version of the original game, which features changed elements, including different color palettes, harder difficulty with new bullet patterns, and most notably, a hyper mode ability which makes the player invincible. When I first heard about this game, I got really hyped and wondered where it came from, since I had never heard of any other Saturn ports or iterations of the game, but that's for good reason. It's been stated that back in the 1990s, Cave, the developers of Dodonpachi, held a contest called Sega Saturn Championship, where contestants would play to achieve the highest scores in the game. While this contest has not been documented well, and it's not known when exactly or where the contest was held, scores were apparently submitted within a 72-hour period to Cave, where the winners were chosen. ZBLNAI was one of the winners, and in some screenshots of the game, his name can be seen, suggesting the ROMs themselves were personalized. This has led to a lot of speculation about how many boards of the game were awarded or exist at all, as a list of winners has never been found. I've seen claims that say around 100 units were made, but others have said the number was as low as 2 or 3. It's really hard to tell with so little information about the contest in general. However, what might be more important than getting an idea of how many exist is whether or not the game can be preserved, which at this time it has not been. There is no way for anyone except for the contest winners to play the game, since it's never been dumped. In 2016, an arcade archivist named Showtime was able to locate a copy of the game, and its owner was open to the idea of having it dumped, but as far as we know, it never happened. Even though the game isn't available to play, there's still plenty of video recordings of the game, with the most famous playthrough coming from a VHS tape given out to subscribers of a now defunct arcade magazine called Gamest. There also have been some sightings of the game out in the wild, with one claim stating it was borrowed by a Tokyo Game Center in 2004 and another at the Cave Matsuri convention in 2006. While the game hasn't made any appearances in a while, I really do have hope that it'll be re-released by Cave someday or dumped someday. We're definitely in a really good era for preservation and archiving video games, so I believe it'll only be a matter of time before this one is unearthed. When it comes to lost dubs, I'll admit they're not a genre of lost media I've had too much interest in. There are usually dozens of different language dubs for anything that aired on popular channels, so it's a given some of them are going to get lost. and the effort it takes to find all of them isn't something I care to invest time into. However, when it comes to lost English dubs, that's a little bit of a different story, and gets me interested. Lost English dubs happen more often than you might think, especially with obscure anime that was never put onto home media, or English dubs that were produced outside of the US. One of my favorite examples that relates to this is Frontier Enterprises, a dubbing studio based in Japan that created English dubs of anime and movies primarily for use on Japan Airlines. The interesting part about this company is all their talent were from Japan, so you'd have a variety of quality, which makes the feel of the dubs quite unique. I didn't even know this company existed until I went down a rabbit hole and discovered them. But there's a far more famous English dub that has gone missing, and the search surrounding it got some attention. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood was one of the last few anime shows I watched on Adult Swim back in the early 2010s, and its fantastic dub quickly became an icon in the genre, and with fans. So now, take that amazing dub, and change it so Ed sounds more like a high-pitched female, give Armstrong a German accent, and make it all around not good. Such a dub exists, and was created by Animax, a TV network located in Asia, who dubs anime in English for the southeastern parts of the country. Animax's portfolio contains many popular anime series. However, in almost all these cases, the dubs are notoriously awful. This is similar to how Frontier Enterprises would find talent within its own country. Animax's voice actors come from all over Asia, so English is not their first language, and script translations can be poor. But it's for these production values that people want to find their content, which has never been released on home media. Animax only holds broadcasting rights, which prevents them from releasing DVDs, and there never was any interest in recording the dubs from TV, or even making bootlegs of them. In fact, most of the only details regarding Animax's collection of dubs come from Americans who were in Southeast Asian countries at the time of their airing, and also where a lot of the details surrounding this bizarre Brotherhood dub are sourced from. Some of the info that's been passed around came from a forum called Anime India, which is now defunct, but used to have a large discussion about Animax's content. This included threads dedicated to specific series, as well as master compilations of Animax productions, availability of shows, and even discussions about trading episodes. It was cool to see that there were hardcore Animax fans out there, but nothing from this era specifically resulted in Brotherhood content having been saved. And the only piece of content I was able to locate at the time of research was an ad described as being from the original Full Metal Alchemist series, but there doesn't seem to be any mention of that existing. The download link didn't work, and even searching for some of the old usernames didn't lead anywhere useful. It seems as though the time to archive this dub has long passed, and the people who would be most easily accessible to do that are no longer in the community. There was a rumor that the entire series was available to stream on Animax's website in the early 2010s, but no evidence has been found to suggest they were there. While the search for the series is still a large piece of lost media, we did end up getting some new content from the show, when several clips were uploaded to Twitter by Yui Haruhara, and confirmed the allegedly strange-sounding character voices were legit. Lost media comes in all different forms, and it's always exciting when I discover a new type of lost media that I hadn't even considered existing before. This time, it's in the form of a piece of artwork that's never been seen by the public and might not exist at all, leading to a very interesting mystery that has remained unsolved to this day. I'm sure you're curious what this search means, so let me introduce you to video game art. Obviously, video game art is nothing new, and it's been around as long as games themselves. The official representations of characters and assets usually included in the manual or guidebook. There's actually a pretty big scene surrounding preservation and archival of this media, and until you really dig into it, there's a whole world of rare or hard-to-find art pieces you might not know exist. A couple years ago, my brother put together a video on some of the scariest video game art he's come across, and many of his selections came from a Japanese guidebook for Baroque, which had never been available publicly or scanned online before. This can be applied to many titles, both popular and obscure. But the search I'm referring to is a little different than this, and leads us to an issue of GameFan magazine. One day while I was browsing game magazines for a different lost media search, I came across their review of Sonic Adventure, in which a recolored image of Sonic from the box art appears. While this recolored art is unofficial, I thought it was really interesting it existed at all. There exists no artwork of Super Sonic from Sonic Adventure, despite how he appears in the game, which led this magazine to create their own. After tweeting out this curiosity, someone in the replies of the tweet claimed Super Sonic didn't get official artwork until Sonic Shuffle, which led to a discussion about whether or not this piece was real. Turns out that while Super Sonic's head appears as an icon in Sonic Shuffle, that's all you ever see of the character, and this full body image was sourced to a fan artist, making it unofficial. Apparently, this image has been passed around a lot over the years, and looks so believable, people often mistook it for an official piece, which is understandable since the heads look nearly identical if you compare the two. So while we know this piece is unofficial, it got me thinking about the icon that appeared in Sonic Shuffle itself. Was there ever a full body version of this, and if so, was it ever released? I've never come across it before, and started thinking it might have just slipped under the radar, especially considering Sonic Shuffle was an obscure and less popular game. This sent me down a rabbit hole of Sonic media, in an attempt to locate where I could find the image, and I came upon 3 leads to follow. The first lead was similar to how I found that recolored Sonic to begin with, looking through more magazine articles that discussed or reviewed Sonic Shuffle, with the hopes that one of them placed Super Sonic within the page, and spent quite a while looking through them, from the US and all over the world, hoping I'd come across it. Despite having reached some really far depths of content, not only for Sonic Shuffle reviews, but also international gaming magazines, I came up empty-handed, and figured no third-party source had access to this image. So I started thinking in the opposite direction, that maybe it's hiding in an official Sega source that no one thought or bothered to look through yet. Guidebooks and websites were the big areas of interest, so I did my best to search on a variety of Sega, Dreamcast, and Sonic websites, hoping something would pop up. But unfortunately, I didn't even come close to something like an old artwork gallery that would have been online back in the day. And as for guidebooks, I couldn't find a single one that was made for Sonic Shuffle, so I think the game was just too obscure and unpopular for that to have happened. The last idea I had at this point was to look through the game's instruction manual and hope it was there, just that it had gone unnoticed all this time. While I didn't find the full body piece, I did make an interesting discovery that the crop on Super Sonic's icon is slightly different compared to the Japanese version. This means that whoever worked on the manual probably had access to the full piece at one point and had to recrop it, and it would be possible to get some confirmation on that. Surprisingly, The manual had a credits section, and I was able to reach a former employee who worked on its creation and design. But unfortunately, they weren't able to recall much and didn't have any assets that they would have used during that era, which makes sense. That's about as far as I got in trying to find this full piece, and I wasn't even able to confirm a full piece exists, but it seems likely that it would. A few new pieces of art were made for the game, and everything else was reused from Sonic Adventure. It wouldn't make sense that only the head of Super Sonic had been designed for either game. I believe the piece didn't become lost on purpose, but rather there was never a need for full-body Super Sonic, and over time, it became forgotten about. While the 25th anniversary Sonic art book omitted this piece, there could definitely be more opportunities for it to appear in the future. And those are just some of the coolest pieces of lost media that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, but never quite had the right video to do it. I'm always finding new mysteries and interesting pieces of lost media, so without a doubt, there will be more collections to come, and maybe even a few of these topics can get some search efforts going. There's something about searching for known lost media and then spreading awareness for lesser known lost media that kinda go hand in hand. All the big topics that people like to search for started off being small until their story could be told, and more interest came out of that, as a result of people learning about the topics in the first place. I feel like this format is perfect for that level of discovery, and it's really fun talking about certain pieces of lost media that I couldn't fit anywhere else. Together, they stand as some of my interests, and it'll be really cool to get new information about them, which can happen, or even solve their bigger mysteries. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to check out some of my other game-related lost media videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, Finn.